My name is Dr. Manisha Gupta and I am Assistant Professor in Noida Institute of Engineering Technology in MBA department, and I welcome you in a business research method class. And in today's session we are going to discuss about snowball sampling, purposive sampling and the sample size. So, these will be our table of content for this lecture. Now, I start with the snowball sampling. Snowball sampling method is your non-probability sampling technique, and basically what happened in the snowball sampling method, it is the producer where the subsequent respondent are obtained from information by providing the initial respondent, and the snowball sampling is where the researcher participant and recruit the other participant for the test of the study. Means in this type of the sampling method, suppose there is a researcher, he is going to recruit two participant A and B suppose, and then again these participant is going to recruit other participant, and there will be the chain of the participant and they all involved in our study. And basically it is used where the potential participant are hard to find or where the respondent are not easily responding to it. Then in the snowball sampling where the researcher participant recruit the other participant for the test of the study, and it is used where the potential participant are hard to find, and it is called the snowball sampling because once you have the snowball rolling, it is just an example, like if you have seen in a movie or whenever if you have gone to the any hill station, if you throw one ball of ice and it start rolling, then what is happen, that the small ball of the ice which roll, it become a very big ball. The same concept is applied here. The researcher recruit few respondent, then the other respondent start recruiting the other respondent, and at the end the few participant will become a large group of participant. This is just the picture. Take a look here. Suppose it is a researcher, he recruited two people as a participant for their research, then again they recruited three, and then again they recruited other members also in the snowball sampling technique. And most of the time this sampling technique is used where it is hard to find the sample, means where the people may not easily responding on the topic or they are the very few sample or the respondent for that type of a study. Now we start with the purposive sampling. The purposive sampling is where the researchers select the sample based on their knowledge about the study and population, and the participant are selected based on the purpose of the sample, hence the name. Means here we select the sample on the basis of the certain purpose. For what purpose we are using a study, and in this type of the research basically it is selected on the basis of the researcher's knowledge and their perception about the study, and participants are selected according to the need of the study. Hence it may be alternate, name or deliberate sampling, and the applicants who are not meet the profile are rejected. Means in this type of the study the researcher made certain profile from which they want to collect the data, and they collect the data from only those sample who fulfill their criteria, and they cannot collect from those people who did not fulfill the criteria of your researcher. And for example, like you may conducting the study why the higher education choose the community college, means why, if suppose if you want to know that why the certain class of the people choose certain college, or most of the time they go for the like government college or the private college. In our country also people prefer first the government institution for their higher studies. So why they select the government institution for their higher study? So in this case what will the first question, that are you planning to attend a college? after 12th, if the question is asked to the student of the 12th, like are you planning to attend the college, and when the people who answer no would be excluded from our study. So, people who answer no means they are not the ideal population for their study, or they are not fulfilling the criteria, so the researcher may not select them. What is the advantage of a purpose sampling? So, purposive sampling is advantage that each subtype of the purpose sampling has their own advantage and the disadvantage. So, in general, one major advantage of this type of the sampling is that the easier to make generalization about your sample compared to the random sample, and where not all the participants have the characteristics you study. So, it is easily because you generalized your sample. Like we have taken an example, like the researcher want to conduct the study that why the student prefer the government institution in comparison to the private institution. So, they make the they generalize the answer that they will collect the data only from those students who are planning to go for the graduation. So, this is the generalization, and where you can easily make the generalization, and by this first you generalize the study and then you can collect the data by the simple random sampling method. Then what are the disadvantage of this type of the study? The purpose sampling, which is a bit mishonor, and there is no intended biasness in the purposive sampling. However, due to the lack of the random sampling, the purposive sampling is sometimes open to selection of the biasness and error, because if there is a random sampling is absent, then there is a chance for the chances of the biasness and error in our sampling technique. And if you try to eliminate the selection biases to the best of your ability, it can be difficult to defend the choice of your participation. Even though if you try to eliminate that problem, then also if you do that and try to minimize the error, then it may become for you to defend your choice of the participant, and the reader of your study may doubt if the sample was representative. Means they may have a doubt that the population or the sample they have chosen is not a true representative of their study. So, these were the your advantage and disadvantage of the sampling, and for this our all the sampling techniques are completed. So, now we are going to start with the sample size. So, basically what is the sample size? The sample size determination in the mathematical determination is the mathematical estimate of the number of the subject or unit to be included in the study. Means how many response we are going to collect. Suppose if you are going to collect the 100 response from the 100 different people, then your sample size is 100. So, how will you determine that the what sample size will be good for our study? And in the sample size, what is basically means the number of the observation. Sample size represent the number of the observation taken from the population through which the statistical inference for the whole population are made. It shows the number of the observation from the population and through which we take the statistical inference as a whole population or mean. Means they are going to show that the what the whole population is going to think or respond. The size of the sample depends upon the basis of the characteristics of the population, type of the information acquired from the surveys, and the cost involved. If you have lots of the fund, then you can choose a large sample size, but you have the small fund, then you have to choose a small sample size. So, the size of the sample will depend upon your type of the population, the characteristics of the population, then the type of your study or the objective of your study for which you are collecting a research, or what type of the information or what is the objective of your study. And next is the cost, which is going to determine the sample size, or it these factors affect the sample size. Now, the question how large the sample should be the difficult one, and the sample size can be determined by the various factors, and in the generally the sample size is depend upon the nature of the analysis to be performed, means what type of the analysis or the what type of the statistical tool we are going to perform. On that basis we select a sample size. Then the desired precision of the estimates one wish to achieve, means how precise our study will be, how precise our result will be, that also decide our sample size. Then the kind and the number of the comparison that will be made. If you want to make the many comparison, then you will choose the size of the sample according to that. Like if you want to compare the different set of the characteristics of the people, or you want to compare their satisfaction level on depend upon the different group of the people, then you will going to choose somewhat large sample size. So whatever the comparison we want to make, whatever the study we want to make, what is our objective is going to determine our sample size. Now the what is the other factor which is going to decide our sample size is the number of the variable that have to be examined simultaneously, and how the heterogeneous universe is sample. So it depends upon the number of the variables or the factor which we are going to study in our study, and also the characteristics of the population. If your population is a very much heterogeneous, then you have to take the large sample size. If your population is a homogeneous in nature, or they may have the very similar characteristics, then you can go for the small sample size also. Now we are going to discuss about what are the effect of your small sample size and what are the effect of your large sample size. The sample size that are the too small reduce the power of the study and increase the margin of error, because when you choose the small sample size, it may be the chances that they may not be the too representative of your population, and here the chances of the error is increased, and which can render the study to be the meaningless if your sample size is too small. And when the researcher are the constraint to the small sample size for the economical or the logistical reason, they may have to settle with the less conclusive research, whether or not. This is the important issue and depend ultimately on the size of the effect they are studied. So you have to choose the appropriate sample size, not too small, because when we choose the too small sample size, then there is a chances of the increase in the marginal error, and this type of the research may not give you the conclusive result. Now what is the problem with the large sample size? Basically we most of the use the large sample size, which may be the ideal for the research or the statistical analysis. However, it is not always true. The large sample size that exceed the value estimated by the sample size calculation present the different hurdle. Suppose if you have calculated the sample size and your sample size increased more than the calculated sample size, then you may have the different problem. First is, it may be the some ethical issue. Suppose if you are conducting the study in the medical science and you are conducting the study on the patients, then in this the more patients are involved in your study, and which may be the uncomfortable for them, and if they are uncomfortable, then they may give you the inferior result. First problem is that. Second problem is that the use of the large number of the cases can also involve the more financial and human resource, and necessary to obtain the desired research, means your cost is going to increase, your manpower requirement is going to increase. So overall, if the cost is going to increase, that sometime may reduce the effectiveness of your study, because everything is related to the cost and your profit and cost. If we put more cost and the profit which we are getting from it is less, then the result may not be very good, or the obtained result may not be the beneficial for the organization. So, these were the problem with your large sample size. Then how will we determine the sample size? So, there is two stages of the determining the sample size, and it may have 6 steps. In the first step, what we have to consider our sample size variable. In the first stage, we have to consider the sample size variable, and before you can calculate the sample size, you need to determine the few things about the target population and the level of the accuracy needed. First is your population size. Now, how many people are talking about the total, and find out this means what is the exact population size from whom you have to conduct a study, or what is your size of the total population for the study. Suppose if you are talking about the customer satisfaction towards the Tata Motors, then what will the population size, that the how many people are using the Tata Motors cars, or whatever the sample of the segment we have chosen. So, that will be your total sample size. Then next is marginal error or the confidence interval. You have to calculate the marginal error and the confidence interval. So, basically we all know that the error is inevitable. Whatever you do, there may be the chances of the some error in your study, and the question is how much error you are going to allow. So, the margin of the error or the confidence of the interval told us that how much error we are allowing in our study. The marginal error or the confidence of the error express in terms of the mean numbers, means the mean of our study, and you can set how much difference you allow between the mean number and your sample and the mean number of your population. Means you are going to study or the calculating the mean of your population and the mean of your sample, and you are going to allow that the how much difference between the both means will be allowed. Here the one example is given, like if you have ever seen the political poll on the news, you have seen the confidence interval and how it is expressed. It look like something like 68% of the voter says yes to the proposition Z, means proposition Z means that person, they are going to 60% of the people are going to say that they are going to vote for them, or they agree with the something, and in this case you may allow the marginal error of the plus and 5%, means the 5% maybe up and down will be possible from this result, whatever the result we have expressed. So, you allowed the 5% of the error, it may be more than that value or it may be less than that value. So, this is our confidence interval or the margin of error. Then in the confidence interval also, this is a separate step with the similar name confined with the interval as in the steps 2, but it deals with the how confident you want to have that the actual means fall within your margin of error, and the most common the confidence interval is a 90% or the 95% of the confidence of the 99, means your result will be 99% correct, 95% or the 99% of the result is your correct. So, this show that how much confident you are, means you are saying that whatever the result we have conducted, that is a 99% true. Then you have to calculate the standard deviation. So, what is basically the standard deviation? Basically in this step you estimate how much response you are receive and will vary from each other, means you are receiving a response and how much one response will be different from the other response, and to what extent from the your whatever the mean we have calculated. Suppose take an example like you are calculating that how many what is the most desired or how much money customers want to spend in a month. So, there is a 10 customer, you can calculate the all customers value and you get the average, how much average one customer is paying. If you calculate every 10 customers value and you get to the average, that what is the average value, or we can say what is the average mean, and you will get to know from that mean what is the deviation means. Suppose I take an example, like suppose you asked the customer who is regularly visiting some grocery store and you ask how much money you have spent. You take 10 customers. One customer said I spent 10 rupees, other said 15 rupees, then other said 10 rupees, then other said 15 rupees, and last one is said 20 rupees. So you get to calculate its average or the mean. When you calculate this average, what we are going to do? You calculate this. So what is the value is 20, 30, 40 and 15, it is 70. And how many people are there? 5. So you divide 70 by 5 and you will get the value is your 14 rupees. So 14 is a average, your mean. So you will compare to see that what is the difference between the 40. So difference between 14 to 20 is 6, 15 is 1, 10 is 4, then again 15 is 1 and 10 is 4. So these are the example of your standard deviation. And what we actually do, and whatever we calculate, if there is a low standard deviation, means that all the value will be clustered around the means most of the people are saying the same thing, or they have the similar perception or the similar result. If your standard deviation is less, and where the high standard deviation means that they are spread across and the most wider range from the very small to the very large outline figures. Since you haven't run your survey, the safe choice is the standard deviation of the 0.5%. You must take as a 0.5%, that is a standard deviation for your study, which will help you to make that your sample size large enough to reduce the standard deviation. Then stage 2, you have to calculate the sample size. Whatever we have done in 1 to 4 step, you are ready to calculate the sample size you need. This is done using the another online survey size calculated on the paper or the pencil method. First of all, you have to find out your Z score. So how do we find the Z score? Next, you need to turn your confident level, means the level of the confidence which we have calculated, into the Z score. And here the Z score for the most common confidence level is, suppose you are taking the 95% interval, you minus this and you will get this result. For the 95%, this result, for the 99%, this result. And if you choose a different confidence level, use the Z score table to find your score. Then use of the sample size, use the sample size formula. So what is the sample size formula? When you get, plug your Z score, standard deviation, confidence interval into the sample size calculation. So this is the formula for the sample size calculation. Z score square into your standard deviation and 1 minus standard deviation divided by the margin of error with square, and by this formula you will get our sample size. This equation will give you sample size. Now what are the practical consideration in a sampling? So practical condition in the sampling is, we have to detecting the chance of the difference is often aimed at a experiment or the set of the measurement, and we want to learn which vendor, process or the diagram provide the better result. So before conducting our lesson, we have to learn that whatever the vendor, process or the research design will provide our better research for the successful planning of your sampling technique. And when we use the sample to estimate the statistics for the population, we take the risk that the sample provide the value that are not the representative of a population. For example, if you use the professional basketball team to the sample for the men's height, because they may not be your ideal population, because in the basketball team most of the men's height is more than your general population. So you have to choose the population which is ideal, you have to choose the sample which is ideal to the population. And suppose like this example, we take the example like you want to calculate the average height of the men, so you should not take the basketball players or the sportsmen, because and especially in the basketball team the men are selected who have the more than the average height, so their height is a more, so they may not be the ideal sample for our population or the research. So before conducting the sampling we have to take the certain consideration like your design of the sample, type of the study, and your objective of the research, and what should be the ideal sample. You have to study the characteristics of the populations also. So these were the practical consideration which we consider before we start selecting our sample or the sampling technique. So with this I am ending the unit 4. See you in the next class, and in the next class we are going to start our unit 5. Thank you everyone.